So today I'm going to talk about kind of some ways that you can approach writing your cover letter and personal statements. Um, and I try to, you know, try to bring it to you in a way you guys can understand, right? Every like piece of social media you have has a bio or an about option on your page, right? Facebook has a little about option. Twitter does. You have your Twitter bio, right? And those are there so that someone, when someone finds your profile, they can get to know something about you, right? And the important thing to remember is anytime you look at a bio or an about section on a social media profile, that person is telling you what they want you to know, right? So it's a curated, like kind of like best view of that person or of yourself when you make your bio, right? Your profile is an introduction. It tells people who you are, what you like, and these are the things that I think you should know about me or that I want you to know about me, right? So that's every one of those is the same. And I think that your personal statement is the same thing, right? You're going to do the same thing, right? So a cover letter or personal statement is giving you a chance to introduce yourself to the person who's going to be interviewing you or reviewing your application before you actually meet them, right? This is the time where you get to first kind of impress upon that person why you would be a good fit for that position, uh, and why they should hire you or they should accept you into their program, right? This is going to be a theme that I'm going to have, which is do not overshare, right? People have a tendency when they hear the term personal statement that they're like, cool, we're going to get personal. And there's a fine line between, a good personal statement and a therapy session, and you don't want to cross into therapy session, right? So I think you're trying to do four main things with a cover letter or personal statement. You're trying to introduce yourself, trying to state reasons why you're interested in the position, explain why you'd be good for that position, and describe why you're motivated or excited about that position, right? So you don't want to start your personal statement with, hey, I was born in a log cabin, uh, you know, 15 years ago. And then it was a cold and rainy night. And then I was 5 and kindergarten was rough, right? You need to hit the things in your personal statement or your cover letter that are most relevant and important to you as an applicant at that time, right? You're working with a limited page count for these. So you really need to be concise and really focus on those things that you need to communicate. Again, I'm going to say this multiple times, don't get too personal, right? You're not trying to impress the reader, slash, you're not trying to like oversell yourself, right? I think a lot of people think they need to be, you know, a little, I guess the word would be like braggadocious, like very much like trying to sell themselves or really trying to be like, I'm the greatest person ever. And again, these people see a lot of cover letters, they see a lot of personal statements. Those kind of things aren't going to impress them. They're going to be able to kind of cut through the kind of like fluff, um, you know, bragging, and really try to get to the things that you offer as support for these statements. So it's better to focus on supporting why you're a good candidate or you'd be good for the position or you're well qualified than it is to just say like, I'm super well qualified and then not give any like substance behind that, right? And like I said before, you have a page or a character limit. So be concise. You really need to work on, you know, when you write it, you're going to write it once and you need to go back and you need to cut stuff out of it and tighten it up so that you can take out the things that are maybe a little filler and get more substance into the document, but still keep it to a page to 2 pages. right? Is my, oh, there we go. Right. So if you have a Tinder profile, don't lie, you probably do, right? You, again, you're saying why you would be, hopefully you're saying why you'd be a good person to go out with on a date, right? You have really honed in and selected the things you want to talk about that are going to make you someone who is dateable, right? You're not going all the way back to your childhood. You're not spending all this time talking about a trauma that might have shaped you as a person, but really might not be super important for you as someone who you're going to date, right? So you've kind of picked only the stuff that matters for this particular thing that you're trying to accomplish. You're trying to get a date, you're putting down the things that are appropriate for that, right? You're trying to get into graduate school, you're trying to get a job. You want to put the things in your cover letter or personal statement that are most pertinent to that goal. Also, I do like that the number 2 thing for men on Tinder, the most swiped jobs, is founder slash entrepreneur. I always thought that entrepreneur was a fancy way of saying unemployed, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's something new and different there. But yeah, so sadly, nowhere on this list is organic chemist. This seems like an oversight from Tinder. Seems like I should be at the top here, but you know, what are you gonna do? Okay, so think about this as your cover letter or your personal statement. It's kind of like your elevator pitch. So the concept of an elevator pitch is you are in an elevator with someone who you're going to interview with, or that is a hiring manager, and you have just a few floors to tell that person about yourself, right? You're going to be concise and you're going to have certain things that you're going to want to talk about, right? You're going to introduce yourself. You're going to state why you're interested in the position. You're going to explain why you're good or prepared for the position. And you describe why you're motivated and excited, right? In an elevator pitch, you're doing that in the time it takes the elevator to go from the first floor to like the 4th floor of the building. You have a sense of how much time that is, right? Your cover letter and personal statement is that same concept, but in written form, right? You've got about a page for a cover letter. You've got about 2 pages for a personal statement. Give your pitch in that, with that limitation, right? So there's a difference between a cover letter and a personal statement. Cover letters are typically for job applications. They need to be, typically most jobs are going to ask you for a cover letter to be part of your application materials when you do them, even if they're online, right? You're going to make it clear what position you're applying for. You're going to introduce your education and qualifications, but you're not going to go in too much depth, right? You're going to highlight aspects of your resume or CV that are relevant to the position, but you're not going to like restate them in great detail, right? The cover letter is kind of giving them a taste of what they're going to see when they get into your application. You don't have to just rehash your entire application on your cover letter, right? You're going to tie your experience to the job description, and typically the length of these is about a page. Personal statements are more for graduate professional schools, right? They're going to introduce you and your motivations for seeking this position or seeking further education, right? Highlights experience with detail that's relevant. So in a personal statement, you might go into a little more depth about research that you've done and your responsibilities within that research, right? And if you can, you want to tie it to, again, the mission of the institution or some way to show that you're going to mesh well with what their goals are. So we're going to start on cover letters. We're going to talk about the recipe for a cover letter, not the awesome song by E40. We'll get to that later. All right. So This first thing is an old-timey old man thing that might not be as important now, right? Which is you want to put somewhere, usually in the first sentence or two, the position that you're applying for, right? So, um, I'm writing in regards to the quality control chemist position and then the posting number. This is a little bit less important now with most applications being online, right? The HR person is just going to have a folder on their computer that has all the quality control chemist positions. But if you have it in there and something gets moved around or lost or someone prints something out, right, at least you will, like, they'll be able to make sure that they can tie your application to whatever specific job, right? You want to introduce yourself and your background. You only want to give a few lines to this. Like, you don't want to go a whole page on that, right? So I'll be graduating with a degree in chemistry from Coastal Carolina in December 2020. And then you touch a little bit on your research or your experience that makes you a good fit for the Busch beer brands, right? You want to describe your experience. So you want to use words, abbreviations, and similar phrases to what is in the job description. So if the job description says, applicants must be proficient in the use of HPLC, GC, and other analytical methods in determining the composition of beverages, when you write about your experience is going to make you, good for this position, right? You want to use some of those same words that are in the job description, right? So you want to work in the phrase analytical methods. You want to use, you want to use HPLC and GC in your description. You want to work beverage in there. And part of the reason for this is that oftentimes letters are going to be screened by a computer first, and they're using algorithms to look for certain words and phrases. So if you can incorporate those same words and phrases into your cover letter, it's going to ping and maybe move further up the list of applications to look at, because, hey, we said we wanted these things, and this person's cover letter mentions these things, so they might be a better fit for the position, right? When you talk about your research and things like that in the cover letter, you can go into some detail, but don't get too technical, right? The people that are going to be reading this aren't going to be like technical experts in the field. So you don't want to get into too much nitty gritty or talk about, experimental design or HPLC settings, because that's going to lose them. And it's going to make it harder for them to work through that cover letter when they have to read it. Another thing is you may have heard that, just take all the words from the job description and just put them at the end of your cover letter in white font. So our computer overlords will read them, and then you'll go further up the list and they'll be like, oh, this is a really good match. Don't do that. Like, you can write a cover letter that incorporates everything that you need to incorporate and that is good without having to kind of like try to game the system. Because if it gets past the computer and then your cover letter in the rest of your application doesn't support you getting that job, just because you've tricked the computer doesn't mean you're automatically going to get the position, right? So tell them why you want to work at this place, right? So try to show some knowledge in the company or organization. You can get information from the website or recent news, right? So here are some examples. Just like you're not trying to sell yourself too hard in the letter, you're also not trying to kiss up too much. So don't lay on the "I want to work for you" or "I think you're a good company" on way too thick, right? Don't be like, "Oh, I've always dreamed about working for such an excellent, respected company. I love Bush beer more than life itself, and ensuring that every can is great would be a dream come true." Like, that's just too much. And you might think, wow, who would ever write that? People who want postdocs. I've gotten emails. I don't ever take postdocs. I don't have that kind of cash. And they're like, "I have really followed your work and you are so respected." I was like, calm down. Like, my wife doesn't respect me this much. Like, so like it's pretty obvious when someone is like putting it on way too thick, and it just kind of comes off as like, that just doesn't feel right. And so people looking at cover letters are going to have the same like initial feeling, right? And again, you got to wrap it up. You got to finish this somehow, right? Personally, I like to restate in the last paragraph why I'm good for the position, right? So something where you've talked about your training and stuff. You're like, "Oh, I feel that my training and experience with HPLC and GC, along with their specific use in the analysis of beers and other beverages, makes me an ideally suited for this position," right? So you've taken everything that you've kind of talked about before in terms of education and experience, and you have kind of condensed it to a sentence to be like, "Hey, remember those 2 or 3 paragraphs you read before this? Here's it all again real quick. Don't forget, I have the experience you want." Also, try to hire yourself on some level, right? So I like to try to work in a sentence where it's like, "I look forward to hearing to you," or "I'm excited to become part of your team." Something where maybe subconsciously you put them like, yeah, they'd be a good fit for the team. You just kind of put that out there. Now, the reason I say to hire yourself is when I was an undergrad, I was a sophomore and I was interviewing for a position at NIOSH in Morgantown, West Virginia. It's the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health. And I was about halfway through the interview, maybe 3/4 of the way through. And I was just like, "So when do I start?" And they were like, "Oh, talk to Monica and she'll let you know when you start." I don't know if they were going to hire me, but I was just like, "So when do I start?" And they were like, "Oh, yeah, we should just hire you." So I always feel like I kind of hired myself for that position. And it wasn't like I was like, "You need to hire me now." It was more just like, "So, like, I'm going to just insert myself onto the team here and see how it goes." And I think trying to do something like that, that's like subtle, where again, you're trying to put in their head, like, you know, you've stated again why you'd be good. And then you're like, "Hey, I'm looking forward to be part of your team." And then we'll be like, "Yeah, that's a good person to have." Right. So again, uh, uh, there you go. There are the keys for making a cover letter. So a thing to remember is the first person to read your letter has no clue, right? Typically, if you apply to a company, it's going to go through HR, right? So don't get too technical. You're going to lose them. Assume this is the first person to read your cover letter, right? So, and again, the first person may not even be a person. It might be a computer. So that's why trying to put those words in there that kind of tie back to the job description are important, right? Again, I, for one, welcome our computer overlords. So we're going to switch gears to personal statements. Personal statements are more personal, right? I feel like that they're kind of more focused on your motivations, right? So you need to answer questions like, why do I want to go to medical school, dental school, pharmacy school, graduate school? What experiences do I have that show me that this is the correct career path for me? Right? Medical schools, dental schools, pharmacy schools, they want the class that they bring in year 1 to be the class that graduates in year 4. They don't really want to lose anyone. They want everyone to go through. So you want to show them that you have the experience, that you know this is the right career path. For graduate school, right? You want to answer questions like, why am I interested in research? What research experience do I have that kind of prepares me? And what were my research responsibilities and accomplishments, right? Again, we have a 4-part approach here. Again, if you know 90s rap, you have the a 1, 2, 3, into the 4 in your head, right? So motivation, why do I want to go to professional school? Goals, what do I want to do after professional school? Actions, what have I done? What have I done to prepare for professional school? And why is this school the right choice for me, right? And this often kind of ties into why you're the right choice for the school, right? So for professional school, when you talk about motivation, I think a trap that a lot of people fall into when they try to write their personal statement is they kind of fall back onto the I had a sick relative, I was sick, um, kind of structure to their letter. And I don't feel like that is kind of a necessary thing for you to do, right? If you truly, were motivated by, the illness of a family member, fine, write about that. But don't feel like you have to structure your letter in that way because um, a lot of people do that. So your story isn't going to typically stand out from the other 500 people that wrote about a grandparent who had cancer, right? So just be mindful that you don't have to fall into that trap, right? Make sure the story that you are, if you're trying to tell a story of, again, a sick relative or, hardship in your life, that story does not take over from you being the focus of your personal statement. So I had a student write a personal statement. It was 2 pages. I would say about a page to a page and a half was really focused on her brother who had been sick and had passed away. And she got lost in that personal statement. That personal statement stopped being about her, and it was more about him. And, that's not what you're trying to do. You're trying to communicate about yourself, right? I think that if it's a 2-page personal statement, if you have some narrative to tell to kind of like, get into your personal statement or to kind of tie things together, maybe a quarter to a third of a page could be devoted to that narrative, but then that still leaves the other like 1 3/4 pages or 1 2/3 pages to be about you, right? Make sure that if you are going to use one of these, if you are going to use a narrative device or a narrative at the beginning, that it ties in with the rest of your personal statement, right? I had a sick relative, so I decided to go to medical school, and that led me to do these things, right? And so then that can be, you can have this through line about how this event caused you to do these things to prepare for medical school, right? You can refer back to it as a thing that ties the document together, but it doesn't take things over. And you don't want to just have like a story about a sick relative or being in the hospital and then never refer back to that again. So it kind of feels like it's out of place. Again, you still have to like try to write a reasonable like English document like you were in, freshman composition or whatever, right? So, you should try to have a theme that ties everything together that you can kind of keep referring back to or that holds it together. So let it be helping others, promoting wellness, helping families in need. If it's more of a graduate school, like being curious or something like that is something you can like hold on to as you go through each of your paragraphs, right? So you should say what your career goals are in your personal statement. Some programs might look for students who want to stay local or work in a certain group or work with a certain group after graduation, try to tie your motivations and actions to your goals. Often your goals will be discussed with your motivations. I'm motivated to go to professional school so I can do this thing, right? The motivations are going for going to professional school. We're going to have had you take some actions. So what are things that you have done to specifically prepare to go to professional school, right? So are there specific courses you've done? Do you have did you have research experiences, right? It's not enough oftentimes to say like, I did research, right? You want to give a little more detail on what your responsibilities were, what you accomplished, how did this prepare you for professional school, right? You want to touch on any kind of professional training, volunteering, and employment in the field. Again, give a touch on like what your responsibilities were, how did this experience prepare you or clarify your path. Now, when I say talk about your responsibilities, I'm not saying have a whole paragraph about your volunteering, but there's a big difference between I volunteered in the emergency room, period, or I volunteered in the emergency room and would wait with children so their parents could go leave the room. I provided, coloring books and entertainment for children to give parents a break, right? So now they both are saying I volunteered in the emergency room, but the second one is giving a clearer sense of what you did, but you've kind of made it's still like a sentence or two. You're not making it a whole paragraph, but you are giving someone a little bit more detail than just like I volunteered or I did research with Dr. So-and-so. Well, what did you do? There's a big difference there, right? Talk about community. You can talk about community involvement, what your responsibilities are. How do these activities tie into your motivations? I want to help people. I did this thing that allowed me to help people, and this reinforced that I really like helping people, right? Choice. Why are you choosing this school? Tie your motivations, actions, and goals to the mission statement of the program. See how you, show how you see yourself in the program and how that's going to match with how the program sees itself, right? I think the example I used on Tuesday was if you want to, work with underserved communities, right? Talk about how you would want to be involved with the free clinic that they have at the medical school, because then you can say like, this is something that you do that fits well with what I want to do, right? So talk about specific activities occurring in the program that you'd like to participate in, right? Oops, I went too far. I did it again. Technology, folks, right? So if you have a medical school that does a trip to the Dominican Republic, you could bring up how, the yearly trip that Dr. Awesome does to the Dominican Republic is an activity I hope to participate in, right? So you've now kind of said like, hey, I know what your program does. These are things I can see myself doing in your program, right? Right. So now we're gonna talk about graduate schools, right? You're gonna answer a lot of the same questions, but you're really gonna be focused more on doing research, right? Now, this is the called heartless part of me that says other aspects of the applicant are less important, right? Graduate schools, particularly in the sciences, really want people that are really motivated to do research because that is pretty much all you do, right? So we're talking about your motivations. Why do you want to do research? We're talking about your goals. What do you want to do after graduate school? Your actions that you've taken, what has prepared you for graduate school, and why your choice, this school was the right choice for you, right? So you go to graduate school to become a world expert on something, you gain experience through research. So your motivations are going to be focused on your desire to learn and master a topic. Why do you want to do this? Why is it important to you? I'd say spend about a page or less focusing on experience. Don't get overly personal, emotional in your motivation. Again, the committee wants to know why you're going to work hard and be a successful student. They don't want, an overshare, super sob story, personal statement, right? I talked about this picture before, but I'm going to do it in a little bit less detail now, right? So again, all the knowledge in the world. Elementary school, you know a little. Um, High school, you know a little bit more. Undergrad, you have you specialize in an area. Masters, you've pushed out a little bit more, right? So if you're applying somebody to get a master's, why do you want to specialize in that field, right? You're going to school to learn about literally one thing. Why do you want to learn about that one thing? Why is that important to you? And then for the PhD, right, you push out to create new knowledge, right? Why is it important to you, right? And again, it could be the same thing as Matthew Mike here, right? That you hope to one day be able to, make a difference in someone's life based on the work you did by pushing out knowledge to get to a point where you can cure a disease or solve a problem. And the information that you generated was used by someone else to get to the answer to that problem. All right. So you want to state what your plans are to do after graduate school. And again, this is brief. You want to talk about maybe if you want to go into academia, industry, or government, right? That can tie into why you're picking that school or particular program, because you kind of have that focus. I think that if you want to go into academia, if you're applying to graduate school, you're talking to other academics. So I think that you should maybe spend a little bit more time on like why an academic career might be a good choice for you, right? So again, I'm talking 1 to 2, maybe 3 sentences, right? And you want to tie your goals into your motivation. If you say you're motivated to go to graduate school because you're really interested in learning and scientific curiosity, and then you say I want to be an academic because I want to teach, those things don't 100% mesh, right? So make sure that your motivation for going meshes with then what you want to do long term. Just make sure it all kind of makes sense, right? I think that the actions part of your personal statement for graduate school is going to be most important, and this is going to focus on your research experience. What was the project you were working on? Why was it important? What was the group trying to accomplish, right? So here you can show that you have mastery of the subject that you were working on. And that shows that you will also be able to develop that same mastery when you're a graduate student, right? What was your specific role in the project? What did you do, right? Be specific, don't get too lost in the details. So you want to talk about what you accomplished, has your data been presented, and what you learned about research as a whole, right? So you want to just show that you understand the project and you want to communicate what you did, right? So this is something that I had written up for if you were one of my students, right? So if you just said, during the summer before my senior year, I worked in the laboratory of Dr. Brian Wakefield on the synthesis of phyta and the analogs and stopped, right? You're not wrong. You didn't cut off. You didn't like say anything incorrect, but someone doesn't know what you actually did and what the goals were. So, right, so then you explain, the next sentence explains a project in a little more detail, like the next two. Kind of say like, why are we doing this project? You can say what the goal was and then what you did. So it's a paragraph, but you've kind of condensed the project down to a concise, this is what we were doing, this is what I was able to accomplish. And this could go on, you could add like, I was able to present my work at such and such conference or something, just to give like a full sense of the project. But you don't want to just kind of stop short either just by saying, I did research for Dr. Wakefield, and then move on. Like that doesn't do justice to what you did. You don't want to just stop at like why the project was important. You want to take that next step and say like, what were we trying to accomplish? What was I doing to accomplish the goal of the group? Right? Just make sure you give that full story when you talk about these kind of things. Right? Explain why this school or department's right for you. Right? You want to focus on the research that's available, how it aligns with your goals and motivations. Talk about specific faculty you might be interested in doing research with, right? How does this research interest you, right? So if you wanted to work for Richardson, you could say, oh, the research that Dr. Richardson's conducting on bacteriophages, as possible therapeutics is interesting since I hope to work in biotechnology after graduation, right? Now, this part here might be a smaller factor, but maybe if Richardson is on the selection committee for the program and he is looking for a student, and then you specifically say, like, I'd be interested in working for you, and looks at your application and goes, I'd be fine with having this person in my group, right? Maybe that person would be like, hey, I think we should accept this person because they want to work for me, right? So sometimes, like saying, like, here's the research I'm interested in, or here's the specific faculty, one of those people might be willing to say, you know what, I think we should take this person because I think I would want to have them in my group, right? Discuss any kind of like programs that the department is doing that are going to help you reach your long-term goals, right? I went to graduate school. They now have a program for minority and female students who want to go into academia, right? Where they give them additional training and additional opportunities so that they have the background and experience that when they go to apply to be academics, they have a competitive application, right? So you could say, like, I hope to be able to participate in the department's professional development program to prepare minorities and women for position in academia, so I'm better prepared to start my career, right? Again, you've done a little research, you show that you're interested in the program, right? So what I've kind of given you in the first two parts, the part about cover letters, or the part about personal statements for professional school and in graduate school, is I've tried to give you things or topics you need to touch on throughout your document. But if you kind of answer the questions that I said you need to answer with your document, you aren't going to have a page, right? You're not going to have 2 pages. It's going to be much shorter than that. So what is the rest of the document, right? You're answering those questions kind of spread in with or interspersed with this bigger idea of trying to communicate why you're going to be good for the program. And the way that Dr. Williams, the head of the Pre-Health Advisory Committee, kind of suggests to do this is he calls it the 3 pieces of paper method, right? You can think about your personal statement as going to be 3 paragraphs. And in each of those paragraphs, you're going to want to highlight a trait, an ability, a skill that's going to make you a good fit for your program or the professional school that you're going into, right? So what you want to do is on each piece of paper is going to become 1 paragraph. So if you're going to say on piece of paper number 1, you're going to put a trait. On number 2, another trait. On page number 3, another trait. And then you're going to put kind of bullet points under each trait that supports that statement about you. So if your first piece of paper says that you're a strong researcher, right, you're going to have bullet points under that to support that statement. So you're like, oh, okay, so worked with Dr. Wakefield on 5A analogs for 2 years. All right. And then here are some other things that I did that show that I'm a strong researcher. These are other things that I did. You could add another thing about being a strong researcher, dedicated to laboratory work, and give examples of that. So you have the I'm a strong researcher, and then under that, you're answering questions about your motivation, about what actions you've taken to be prepared, while still talking about that trait for that paragraph. And then let's say that the next thing you want to talk about is being intellectually curious, right? Again, you have your list of things that are supporting you being intellectually curious. Enjoy reading papers outside of my field, pushed my research project in a direction it was not originally set to go. And so you have these points you're talking about. And then as you're talking about those points, you're still going back to what your motivations are for going, how this prepared you. So you have your 3 traits that you're trying to illustrate, and still answering those like overarching questions about why you're going to be good, right? And I think this helps people, this kind of 3 pieces of paper method, because you can look at all the things that you're going to use as support for the skills or traits you're trying to communicate. And then you're also going to be able to then maybe find a good way to like talk about your motivation that kind of ties all of those together. A thing that you can think about for personal statements as well is, imagine that you give your personal statement. There's a search committee. One person on the search committee reads your personal statement, and the person beside them doesn't want to read it. And they just say, hey, tell me about that person that you just read their personal statement, right? You want to give them the words and the language and the examples to describe you. You want them to read your personal statement and say, oh, Brian is a dedicated research student. He did X, Y, and Z, and is intellectually curious because of these things, and is really motivated to come to graduate school because of this reason and this reason. And that really comes through in his personal statement, right? So you want someone to read your personal statement, be able to turn to someone else, and you want them to describe you the way you want to be described, right? So that's your goal in your personal statement, is to make it so someone talks about you the way you want to be talked about, right? So another thing that personal statements can do is they can shape a narrative, right? I think I told you in the last talk that you've already started making your application to professional school, graduate school. If you're in high school, you've already started making your college application, right? And sometimes things don't go well, right? Maybe you had a poor GPA or something. You can use your personal statement as a way to address issues in your application. So let's say you had a low GPA, right? Maybe after your first 2 or 3 semesters, your GPA was a 2.0, but then from that point onward, you had a much better GPA. You finished with a 3.7 starting from your second semester of your sophomore year forward, right? You can, in your personal statement, work in an explanation as to why your GPA is lower, and why they're not getting the student that was a 2.0 for the first year and a half, why they're getting the 3.7 student, right? So it could be something about kind of discovering your passion for, let's say, medicine, right? And you could say like, when I came to college, I was not sure if college was for me, and I really didn't know why I was here, so I didn't apply myself. But then I found my passion for helping people, and realized my best way to do that would be to be a physician. And having that new clarity and goal for my life, I really focused on my education and really improved my grades greatly. I understand my overall GPA is a 3.3, but since I made this change, my GPA has been a 3.7. You're going to get this student, not the student that was lost in their first year. So you have kind of tied like, hey, I'm motivated for going to graduate school or going to medical school because of wanting to help people. I realized this later on, and I've improved since then. And now you can kind of go back to that motivation as you talk about other aspects of yourself. right? And again, you don't have to like use half your personal statement or a quarter of your personal statement to explain why your GPA is not where it should be, but just a few sentences that like acknowledge it and talk about how you are a different or improved applicant than what the numbers would say could help. Right? Another thing is, what if you have limited research experience? What if you go to a college that doesn't have a lot of research active faculty, right? Where someone at Coastal, there are enough faculty that are active in research that if they want to do research, it's kind of just asking around and you will find someone. But maybe you're at a school where they don't have active research faculty and you only have 3 months of research experience, but you had to go out and look for that experience. You had to do applications. You had to really like search for a place to find research experience. So maybe that 3 months of experience isn't as much as someone who has a year, but talking about how I wanted to do research, so I sought it out and I did all this stuff to get this research experience because that's how important research is to me, right? You can make up for the fact that you only have a few months of research by illustrating that it was important to you and you really sought it out. And that can make up for the fact that you don't have as much research because you actually went and found it, as opposed to it just being there and being like, oh, I guess I'll do some research, right? So that can speak to how motivated you are, how passionate you are about research, even if you weren't able to do as much research. So use your personal statement if you feel like there are things in your application that you can address. Use your personal statement as a way to try to fix that or to try to address that. But again, don't have it be like this like giant excuse or it take over the personal statement, but working it in as part of the larger narrative or the larger story you're telling about yourself can be helpful. Right? You want to put the idea in whoever's reading your letter's head that one, they are special, and two, there are no others. They are the only one that you've ever cared for, right? And this is true for hiring managers. This is true for application committees, admissions committees, right? Take some time to tailor your letter to the position or the place that you're applying to, right? You don't have to rewrite the whole letter, right? But maybe you have a few sentences in the introductory paragraph and a few sentences in the conclusion that you can make changes or replace those sentences to make each letter unique to the place that you're applying. It's harder for med school applications because they typically go to AMCAS and you're able to put up one personal statement. But for graduate schools, you're going to submit to each graduate school individually. So you're going to want to the three sentences you have about wanting to work with these faculty or use this equipment or use or participate in this program are going to change letter to letter, right? When you do this, make sure you don't forget. I'm sure that all the faculty that you know have been on a search committee and have gotten a wonderful letter that is addressed to the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. And they're sitting there. I'm sitting in South Carolina at Coastal going like, well, I don't work at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. I don't know how well I'm going to read this letter, right? Like, it's one thing to, intellectually know that the person who's applying to your position is applying to 25 other jobs, but it's different when they just are telling you like, yeah, I applied to this other place. It's so just make sure you don't make those mistakes. Take the second to like proofread, make sure that the sections that you changed have changed and matched the school that you're applying to, right? Again, do not overshare. They want to your hiring managers, your committees, they want to know about you, but they don't want to know everything, right? Going back to the Tinder example, your Tinder profile is not you talking about all the issues in your life, right? It's like, no, this is not the thing to do, right? Your letters should not be too heavy. Don't make them super depressing or go into every gory detail of a personal struggle, right? Make sure they're professional and that the focus of the letter is still you, that it's not on something else, right? We all have baggage, but we don't need to talk about it all the time. You don't want your letter to be about, um, you know, in this case, I had a student write basically this sentence. Right, for a long time, I really hated how I looked. All through school and college, I felt depressed because I was overweight. I was crying myself to sleep every night for years. I decided to make a change. Like that, you can clean that up and make it so like that you took personal responsibility and like made a change in your life, but it not be like as dramatic and heavy. And you're not like at a therapy session with Dr. Katz. That's a deep cut '90s cartoon for you people, right? You're not like you can talk about these issues, but talk about them in a way that's professional and that is serving you and your in the narrative you're trying to tell, and not like overly personal or overly depressing, right? So these are some wise words from Chris Rock. The greatest $8 DVD I ever bought was Chris Rock's Bigger and Blacker. All right. Let's talk about relationships, but that's right, man. Relationships are easy to get into, hard to maintain. Why are they hard to maintain? Because you can't keep, it's hard to keep up the lie. Because you can't get nobody being you, right? You gotta lie. And I'm not telling you to lie on your application. That's the next thing. But the point of this is when you go on a first date, you are presenting the best version of you to that person, right? And, as the relationship goes on, you become more you and less that best polished version of you. A personal statement is similar, right? You are sending your representative in your personal statement, saying, this is the best version of me that will make me good for this position, right? So you need to make sure that you've polished yourself and you're the best version of you can be in your personal statement. Think of your personal statement as your CV or resume's profile page. They let you tell prospective employers or graduate programs about yourself. You want to introduce yourself, state the reasons you're interested, explain why you're good or prepared for the position, and describe your motivation or excitement. And for personal statements, you want to explain your motivation, state your career goals, discuss the actions you've taken to prepare yourself, and explain why you should choose that school.